Hello, and welcome to Greet the Week. I am Mona Duncan, and today's topic is about living life in full expression. And I have a PowerPoint that I've been working on. Matter of fact, I've worked on it just to show this today, but for years, I have worked with the community and the at-risk community and worked with prisoners and so forth. And I have come up with all kinds of 6-hour classes. So I decided that in March, started off with the end of February, doing becoming assertive. And then we went last week more on being assertive. And today is the same thing. It's a 6-week look at, it would be a 6-hour class, so we'll do it in 6 different weeks, looking at being assertive and how to being true to yourself. And so today's topic is living life in full expression. And whenever I was the outreach minister, I held all kinds of support groups. I had overcoming losses as well as just overcoming life in general, learning to overcome the difficulties of life. And I called it living in full expression, because once we can become as authentic as we know how to be, and we are continually meeting different people in different situations, that kind of shows us a different dimension of ourselves that we might not have thought of before. So it's beginning to look at who we are and being the best we can be. So looking at self-awareness, it always starts with self-awareness, and knowing that self-awareness requires us to see things differently. And I have this picture here of a building that is being looked through a crystal. And that crystal makes everything look upside down. But I think the reality of life is that we see it. We have a tendency, illusion, always illusion, that maybe we don't see things as right side up as we may think that we do. And so it requires us to see things differently. It requires us to be willing to look at things from another perspective, to observe whatever it is, to observe our own thoughts, our own actions with a neutral attitude, and to observe what is going on in our life and what is happening with other people with a neutral attitude, looking at it with no condemnation, looking at it with no approval, looking at it not to self-evaluate, it's looking at that it just is, what it is. And the word is, when you put it in the thesaurus and look at it, it means it's what exists. It means what is, what remains, what lives, what stays, what is in existence. So looking at what it is. So there's a highway sign out here close to where we get off the interstate to come to our home. And it says, traffic is frustrating enough. Let someone in. Courtesy is in you. Pass it on. And, I think about that quite frequently. Courtesy is in us. But let's look at, as we go through life, we teach people how to treat us. And so looking how we're always influencing, and we're always being influenced. And so as we go through life, let's just suppose there's some kind of a misconduct. It can be just a misunderstanding. It could be a common remark that was made, such as, what did you do to your hair? And how do we take it? Do we see it as as a slam? Do we see it as, how do we take it? But there's some kind of a misconduct, okay? And so if we don't speak up, if we just take it, we don't speak up, we have we've given consent to, you can treat me however you want to. You see, whether a person is passive or whether they are aggressive, we tend, both comes from a negative self-talk or a lower esteem. And so, depending on how we hear things, if we don't speak up. And so that leads to, all these things kind of lead to something else, leads to conclusions. That leads to not speaking up and not setting any boundaries. And when we don't set boundaries, our confidence and self-awareness is communicated through our posture and through our speech. And so that can lead to abuse. That abuse, where it would be just a disregard or a sarcastic comment or some kind of a put down. And often that leads to the emotions being stirred up, and anger or fear or anger or revenge. And then ultimately it goes on and leads to inordinate boundaries. Well, what is that? That is, we've set a boundary to maybe to hate, to disregard, to hold it in, to not say anything, to be a gossip, to go tell somebody else something, what you're like or what they're like. It's a boundary of type, but it's inordinate. It's not effective. There was a 2020 issue back in 1997, and the interviewer on 2020 was interviewing Luke Woodham, who in Pearl, Mississippi, who had killed his mother. And he was, a direct quote from the guy was the fact that if I can't pry your eyes open, if I can't do it through passivity, if I can't do it through a display of intelligence, then I'll use a bullet. And all too often, whenever we let those things just keep going without learning to speak up, it can become inordinate boundaries. So it's okay to not be okay. Now, last week I put up there this hope is nowhere. And how did you see it? Is it hope is nowhere? Or could it possibly be beginning to see that hope is now here? That if we can put a little space in there, as we can go back to that not to approve, not to condemn, just to look at what is and how can I respond to that. And it's okay some days to just not have it be okay. But as we can look at the fact that help is now here, now where? It's now within ourselves. And then in building relationships, not putting up walls or not digging pitfalls. It is looking at being honest as we can be with the information that we currently have or the way we are perceiving things. It is to let our truth be wrapped in love and realizing that maybe we've, put some things on it that's not really there. Knowing that what you say can be received in an entirely different way. That what we say, what we hear, we can be receiving it in an entirely different way than what the person saying it is intending. And so it's realizing that as we begin to speak up and be true to ourselves, that we can come off, well, maybe the passive person that hasn't spoken up can come off as being the cat that roared, that finally found their tongue. And someone may even make a unkind remark. Well, did you finally get your tongue? Did you finally going to speak up? And it can cause the passive person to just go back into that shell, or the turtle to go back into the shell. Or sometimes we may come off as a roaring mouse. I know in one of the classes that I had, this guy, and he was very aggressive, and he just was condemning of everything that was said, of almost of everyone in the session. And anyway, one day, I don't remember what I had said, but I looked over there, and he held his hand up like he was asking permission. And I thought, wow, this is so out of character for this particular person. And I looked at him and I called him by name and I said, did you want to say something? And he began to speak, and he said, well, Mona, I was just wondering if you had ever thought about, and I'm thinking to myself, come on, I can handle it. But all of a sudden I had this check in my spirit. I thought, this man who was so aggressive and was just argumentative against anything and everything and everyone, he was now trying to see things a little differently. And I wanted to honor that and abide by that. And also the person who had not spoken up before, but is beginning to speak up, and they're kindly finding their voice. Be gentle to it and speak and allow it to happen. And so, courage. Back to the little sign. Courage is in you. And we do have it. We have to have the courage to speak up, or depending on how much we've spoken up, we may have to have the courage to tone down a little bit. But whatever it is, it's always to see things as they are, knowing that there are so many variables that are involved that we can't see it as clearly as we would like to. So here's a little pyramid that I've made. I like to look at things. Well, here's the bottom structure of our pyramid, and the bottom of it is structure. And I'm kind of building it here for you to see what I'm talking about. And structure is who we are. It's what we're made of. It's the 11 systems that we have in our body. It's the bones, the skeletal system. It's the cardiac system. It's the it's the 11 systems of the body that is our structure of who we are. And then on the other part of the pyramid is our behavior. And our behavior has 4 components. According to Dr. William Glasser and choice theory, our behavior consists of the thoughts we think, the actions we take, the feelings we feel, and our physiology, meaning whether we are having heart palpitations, or whether the blood pressure is going up, or whether we're exercising very vigorously and panting. That's part of our physiology. And just like our structure, those 11 systems that we have, the cardio and the mental and the endocrine system and all of that, they work independently, but they also work together in tandem. Well, so is our behavior. We think, we don't realize that our thinking and our acting and all those things, they're working independently, yet in tandem. They're working together. And then we have our function on the other side. And that function includes all of the things that we do, which includes mental, it includes intellectual, it includes social interaction, all physical things we do, whether it is exercising or going, so just the physicality. It includes the environment, the occupation, it includes spirituality. It just includes every function that we engage in. And so all of that makes up our life. And are we aiming for wholeness? And so I look here at a little bit of epigenetics, that the genes, we are made up of genes and chemicals. We are made up of words and chemicals. So our words, those words pretty much are formulated in our mind. Well, we've heard them and we've thought about them. And those words, then we always have something going on in our mind. We're always aware of something, even if it's that going over and over like the hamster on the wheel. But those words go through as our self-talk. And what is our self-talk like? Those words, our other talk. What are we thinking in our mind? What's going on in our mind? What are we saying about others? What words do we listen to? Whether that is TV or books that we read or music that we listen to. What kind of media do we engage in? Those words are always influencing us. What kind of literature do we read? What about the Holy Scriptures and, that are making an impact on our life? And what kind of an impact and what quality and what type? And then chemicals. Our body is made up of chemicals. There are things that we absolutely have to have. It is essential, just like our basic needs are essential in order to have wholeness. And so some of the things that our body craves is protein, carbohydrates, vitamins. And I find it so interesting that, the vitamins are what? They're letters. Vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin C, vitamin D. All these vitamins are part of the words. And how do we nourish ourselves with the words that we think and say? Hydrogen, oxygen, minerals. And we are made up, our bodies are made up of the minerals that's in the earth. Drugs, substance, but whatever, what kind of drugs do we use? Everything has a payoff. Everything has a trade-off. That you have a headache, take an aspirin. Well, it helps the headache, but it also may help to harm something else within the body. So what kind of chemicals are we putting in our bodies? What kind of words are we putting into our mind? And why? And looking at the input, because it's coming into us. It's coming, we're eating it, not only mentally and emotionally, but we're eating it physically. And so it also leads to output. And so until we choose to become aware and to act on the new commitment, we are creating, our creative mind continues to keep running the show. And so, if dogs were teachers, kind of going back with being assertive as opposed to aggressive or passive. If dogs were teachers, they let others know when they've invaded your territory. They avoid biting when a simple growl will do. Dogs teach us that when scolded, don't buy into guilt and get all pouty. Dogs teach us to go back and make friends. Dogs teach us the delight of the simple joy of a long walk. They also teach us to jump through hoops only if you want to, and to eat with gusto, but stop when you've had enough. And that kind of goes back to what I've been saying in these other slides. Is know who you are, be true to yourself, and discover your true self. To write affirmations down as to who you are becoming, and do it in present tense. To publicly commit to accountability. To the things inside that we want to the successes that we have on our goals, the things we want to overcome, to make a public commitment to someone that would help to hold you accountable. To admit slips and then to get up and to get back on task. To realize that whatever we practice, whether we're doing it mindfully or whether we are doing it mindlessly, what we practice continually over and over and over integrates beliefs into our behavior. If we just practice something, it's, whether it is mindless eating, of just picking up and eating, those goodies are there and just mindlessly eating them, it begins to integrate that we believe that just mindless eating is okay. So whatever we practice begins to formulate a muscle, a belief muscle, whether it is for our effectiveness or for our ineffectiveness. And to contemplate on our core values. What do I really value? And how truthful am I to myself? That on a scale of 1 to 10, when we look at our values, to weigh those values independently. And so, how much value do you put on being healthy? Oh, a 10. Yeah, sure, that's a 10. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the heaviest, 10 being the greatest. Sure, it's a 10. But then when we get honest with ourselves, when I got honest with myself, I realized I might be saying that being healthy was a 10, but the way I was living my life, it wasn't. It was way down the scales. And so it's also knowing that in stillness, when we push aside all of the hamster wheel thoughts going through the head, and when we really can discover our true self as to who we really are, and sometimes it may be an oh no, but be encouraged that the choice is yours. The choice is always ours, whether to stay that way or to overcome, whether to see things differently, whether to explore them in another way. So, living in full expression, being alive, being full, being happy, being content. And so, I trust that the rest of your week will be good and effective and many, many blessings.